Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. How are you all? Please let me know that you are here. I wish I could see all of you in person, but right now we cannot. So please let me know in the comments that you're here and that you're watching. And even if you are watching this as a recording, please make sure to put in the comments as well that you are watching us today. So I'm going to give people just a minute to sign on, to find us, to find our video. Be sure to share our video so that others can see us as well today for our June edition of our Healthy Kitchen series. I am so excited that I am still able to continue this partnership with Gilda's Club to be able to do these Healthy Kitchen series, even though we cannot meet in person in the clubhouse. So let us know how you're doing. I want to hear how everyone is, how you're enjoying this weather, and what kind of things that you're doing that are fun and exciting. I know for me, being able to be in our pool, and by pool, I mean a very small kiddie pool, but my 2-year-old just loves it, and she's out there every day playing in that pool. So we're having a good summer so far, and I hope you are all as well. So don't forget to put in the comments. You know me, I'm interactive, so I'm going to be asking you questions. So please use that comment, post comments, post questions that you might have as we're talking today as well. I am going to pull up a PowerPoint because, again, as you guys know me, I'm very visual. So I have a PowerPoint that was created by the Food and Drug Administration. Since this is a lot of their information, we're going to use their pre-created PowerPoint instead of having to recreate the wheel. So I'll pull that up in just a second, but I want to know if you're watching us today. So be sure to post in the comments that you're here and watching. Hello, Diane. I'm glad you were here watching us. And even if you're watching this as a recording, you can still post in the comments, and you can still post your questions or post your comments in there as well, and we'll be able to see them afterward. So with that, I'm going to get started and share my screen to pull up our PowerPoint. So today we are talking about food labels, and those can be a little bit intimidating if you're not really sure what you're looking at when you're looking at those labels and how to read them, what you really should be looking for. There's a lot of information on those labels that we may not necessarily be able to understand or know if that really, what is really telling us if the food is healthy or not. So we're going to go through this PowerPoint and talk through some things to look at with those food labels. And as you may have noticed, they've changed a little bit. In the recent year or two, the FDA has put out new guidance to help the consumers, to help us be able to read those food labels and understand them to make better decisions for us and for our families. So we're going to talk today about the food label and what it is, learn how to read it, look at how you can make healthier decisions when you're out, either shopping or even when you're out eating. Because we know that those small changes can add up. So we want to start at home, our healthy cooking. We have to have good food shopping. And by good food shopping, we need to know what we're shopping for and what to look for with our foods. So we're going to look at that, take a look at those things, as well as looking at the eating out. So making those good choices and knowing what to look for with our foods to see if it's the healthy choice. There's a lot of information on food that might be a little bit misleading. So we are really going to focus on just that nutrition label today. But there are also other ways for us to be able to see if that food is healthy. But today we're just going to focus on that nutrition label. So we need to look at some definitions. And so the first one is calories. The number of calories by itself is not necessarily tell you whether a food is healthy or not. A calorie is actually a unit of energy. So it is telling us how much energy we need from that we're going to get from that food. And our body needs energy. It needs fuel to be able to function. So we use calories to tell us how much energy, but those calories can come from a wide variety of sources. So those can come from everything from our carbohydrates to our fats, to our proteins, to our alcohols, all of those things that are in the food. So a lot of people think calories are related exactly to carbohydrates, which is not necessarily the case. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along here. So a nutrient, when we talk about those, we've talked about nutrients in other Healthy Kitchen series lessons, but what really is a nutrient? It is something that is in our food that helps our body to function. We can get nutrients from foods we eat and as well as the things that we drink. So when we look at our food, we think a lot of the food that we eat, but it also can include our drinks. So when we're thinking of our foods, we need to really include those drinks as well into those. But fats, there are 6 main types of nutrients: fats, proteins, carbohydrates, our vitamins, minerals, water. Those are all examples from the foods that we eat and the things that we drink that give us different kinds of body functioning. So the third one is our percent of daily value. So that is also kind of hard to understand when you don't really know what that means. But it tells you how much of a nutrient can be found in each serving of the food that we're eating and how that contributes to your whole diet. So it's usually based on a 2,000 calorie diet, which some of us eat less than that. Some of us might have a higher calorie than that, but it gives us a pretty good idea of how much of that nutrient we're going to get from that food. And it helps us when we're comparing certain foods as to how many nutrients we're getting from those different kinds of foods. So both calories and the percent daily values are very useful things. They're not the only things that we need to look at, but it's important to know what you're looking at when you're looking for those. So let's look at that nutrition fact. The very first thing that we need to look at, and that probably one of the biggest things that changed from that nutrition label, is that servings. So servings is not necessarily the same as the appropriate portion that your body needs. Very important to think about. Many times the serving size is related to the appropriate portion size, and labeling has gotten much better with that, but it doesn't automatically mean that that serving size is the appropriate portion size. So just keep that in mind as we're going. So here's what an example of a whole nutrition label looks like. So the nutrition facts label is regulated. The FDA regulates this food nutrition label. It is required on most food and beverages. It tells us about the nutrition content. It's found on those containers on either the outside of the box or the bag or the can. It is important because we need to be able to understand what we're putting in our bodies and whether the food that we're eating is really good for us and is really what we want to eat. We can look at the marketing on the front, which again, we're not getting into today, but that doesn't necessarily tell us everything about what's in that food. So let me know in the comments how familiar you are with reading that nutrition label. Are you brand new? You don't even look at it because it's too overwhelming? Are you an expert and you know exactly what everything means on there and that's the only way you shop for your food? Or are you kind of somewhere in the middle there? So let me know in the comments how you fall with looking at those labels. So here's what the original nutrition, or I guess the older version of that nutrition label looks like. And it was not always necessarily the best information for us. It didn't necessarily give us everything that we needed to be able to make those good decisions. So now we have a new and improved version of it. And you'll find that most foods, if not all, have this new label on it. There might be some versions of these foods that don't necessarily have the new label yet, but they are being required to have the new label on them. It's very similar, but there are some very important differences on those. So here's an example of the side-by-side comparison, so you could really see exactly what's changed. So the FDA and let me know too if you have seen this new label or if you didn't realize they had changed yet. So what is the biggest difference? So the serving size is a huge difference that has been changed. It is more realistic to actually be what we eat and drink. So before it was based on the manufacturer's decision. Most of the time, again, they are based on portions, but not necessarily. So you might have 2 servings of a bottle of soda when most of the time we drink the entire bottle of soda when we're drinking it. So they've adjusted those kinds of things to be more realistic to what we are actually putting in. In addition to that, the calories is a much larger, so it's easier to find and easier to see. And all of these amounts underneath the serving size are based on per serving. So anytime you're looking at that, we want to make sure we're looking at it based on each serving, not necessarily for the entire package. So calories from fat has been removed. The type of fat a person consumes is more important than the actual amount itself. So the other thing that's different is that they have included added sugars. So there are lots of different kinds of sugars and lots of different things that can increase those that number, the grams of carbohydrates, but they've added sugars so you know that there are things that are added versus those sugars that might be naturally occurring in those foods. In addition, they've also increased and updated the nutrients. So vitamin D and potassium are now on the labels. Americans historically do not get enough of either of those two nutrients. So they've added that onto the label so that we can see if the foods that we're choosing are going to have those nutrients to help us to increase our intake for those two. Vitamins A and C are no longer required because it's pretty rare that Americans have deficiencies in those vitamins. So they don't see that as being as necessary of a factor in there. And the actual amount is also added in addition to the percent daily value for those nutrients. So the percent daily value, again, is a nice, helpful amount, but it's not the end all be all. And if our percent daily value is a little bit less or a little bit more, or our total calorie intake is less or more, those numbers aren't exactly the same. So they've added the actual amount in either milligrams or micrograms for those nutrients. Okay, now let's break it down a little bit and see exactly what all that means when we're looking at these labels. So when we're looking at our servings, it tells us both the serving size and also how many servings there are in that entire container. So most of the time the serving size is provided in a cup, but it's also provided usually in grams so that you can look at both weight and volume for those. In addition, we have and it's common for packages to have more than one serving, but sometimes there is just one serving in each package, but it does tell you how many. Some labels will have a per serving and a per container amount, but a lot of labels will only have the per serving. So you have to do a little bit of math if you're going to have more than one serving of that food. So the serving size is based on how much we typically eat, right? So it's, again, not the recommendation necessarily, but it's what we realistically eat in that amount of food. So if you're looking at your portion control, which is a whole other topic that we might discuss and that we have discussed in other of our Healthy Kitchen series lessons, but look also at what the appropriate portion size is, not just the serving size. Okay, so calories per serving. Generally, most of us eat about 2,000 calories per day. Every person is going to have different calorie needs. So if you are on a different kind of diet, you might need more calories or you might eat a few less calories. It's very varied based on our body needs and how active we are. There's a lot of different formulas with that. So if you wonder how many calories you should be eating, you could talk with your healthcare provider and get an idea from them about what your appropriate calories should be each day. So let's look at that percent daily value. So that is important to look at. It shows how much of that nutrient serves in that entire daily diet. So we need to see if that is a high amount or a low amount, and to see if that food is high in that specific nutrient or low in that specific nutrient. So as a general guideline or as a general rule, 5% daily value or less is considered low, and 20% of your daily value is considered high. So some of our nutrients you might notice, protein and trans fats generally do not have that percent daily value. So you'll use your grams instead because they're not necessarily specified on the percentage of your daily value for those. So you also see this list of nutrients, right? So we want to know what kinds of nutrients do we want to get lower amounts of and to look for lower numbers on that label versus the foods that we want to see higher numbers for to make sure we're getting more of those kinds of nutrients. So we want to get fewer or look for numbers that are less in our saturated fats, our trans fats, our sodium, and any added sugars. The nutrients we want to look at getting more of are things like dietary fiber, our vitamin D, our calcium, our iron, and our potassium. So when we want to look for numbers, again, the 20% daily value or higher is considered high, and that 5% daily value or less is considered a low amount of that nutrient. So again, it's not a complete perfect world, but it gives us a really nice guideline when we can just glance at that label and see higher numbers in those good nutrients, lower numbers in some of those nutrients we need to eat less of. And we, of course, want to look for 100% of our daily value of those good nutrients each day. So we want those numbers to add up so that we're getting as much of those nutrients as we can. Fats are a very misunderstood nutrient. Fat is very important in our diets, but we want to make sure we're knowing the kind of fat that our body is getting. So we want to know what kind of fat is in the foods that we're choosing to eat. So our dietary fat is necessary for our diet because it helps us, it gives us some energy. It actually helps us to absorb some of those nutrients that we're putting in. So if we're putting in a lot of nutrients, but we're not getting enough of that dietary fat, then we may not be absorbing and using the nutrients that we're putting in. So we want to make sure that we're getting some fats in our diet. And also, it also helps support other different body processes as well. So our saturated fats are usually found in our animal fats. So butter, lard, our meats, processed poultry, like bacon, hot dogs are our processed meats. Any dairy products, a lot of snack foods and sweets. Those kinds of things will have higher amounts of saturated fats. Trans fat is found in small amounts of some animal products, but generally it's formed artificially in some of our foods, like our baked goods, sometimes in coffee creamers, our fried foods, our margarines, our shortenings. So we are looking at lower levels of that. We want to have numbers as low as possible, or even zero on our trans fats numbers. So when we look at our unsaturated fats, our monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, those are not necessarily going to be listed on that label, but we do know some of those foods that are higher in those unsaturated fats. And those are going to be, I guess, better options for our fats than the saturated and trans fats foods. So you might have some questions on that. So I'm going to leave this slide up just for a second. And of course, I am more than happy to share any of this other information with you. You will be able to view this again. This will be saved on the Facebook page for Gilda's Club. And I'm also going to share it on our Purdue Extension Vanderburgh County page. So you can go and watch this video as many times as you want after today. And you can also share it. You can share this video so that others can get this information as well. But be sure if you have questions right now, that put those in the comments so that I can answer them for you. So let's move on now to our sugars, because that's another area that is kind of confusing and sometimes a little bit misleading on these labels. So sugars, the added sugars is what the biggest difference is on the new nutrition label. And those added sugars are things that are either added during the processing. So that might be table sugar, sugars from syrups, honeys, concentrated fruits or vegetables. But they can also be like syrup on your pancakes or sugar in your coffee, things like that. Those are things that are added in. And this chart shows you the source of a lot of these different added sugars. So most of our added sugars come from our beverages, but they can also come from a lot of snacks and sweets that we have as well. So be sure to look for those that are added sugars versus the foods that might have natural sugars in them. So on the list of total sugars, it helps to be able to look not only at the total sugars, but also the ingredients. So ingredients are very important for us to look at on that nutrition label as well. Not only do they tell us what is in the food, but it also gives us an idea of how much. So the higher on the list, the more of that food. So they do it in list in order, ascending by weight of how much is in that, of how much of that food ingredient is in that food. So if you see your first two ingredients as high fructose corn syrup or sugar, that's going to be a much higher sugar food than if it's down lower on that list. So these are different examples of some of the common names for added sugars. But a lot of times we know that our baked goods, anything sweet, is going to have sugar in it or added sweetness in it, but also things like salad dressings and condiments have added sugars in them. So be sure to check labels for those added sugars, especially if you're looking at cutting down the amount of sugar you have in your diet, because they can sometimes be hidden in there. We don't necessarily taste it, but it's still in there. So when we're looking at the amount of sugar, it increases our calories, but doesn't give us a lot of nutrients. So we do need carbohydrates in our diet as the main source of energy for our bodies. But those added sugars are going to, again, increase that calorie amount without really giving us a whole lot of nutritional benefit. So the dietary guidelines for Americans recommends fewer than 50 grams per day of added sugars based on that 2,000 calorie diet. So if you have a higher calorie or lower calorie, you'll need to adjust that just a little bit based on what your calorie needs are. So that's about 12 teaspoons of added sugar every day. So if you want to convert, if you really want to do a really cool experiment, sometimes it's a little scary to really see how much sugar is in some of the foods we eat, and especially drinks. Drinks are usually the biggest culprit for our added sugars because we don't always think of that, again, as a food, which we really should. But you can divide the number of grams by 4, and that's how many teaspoons generally are in that food. But you can also look at that percent daily value of your added sugars to see if that is a high amount or a low amount of that nutrient. And that we want to look for, ideally look for less than 5% of the daily value, but 20% is considered a high amount. So we've looked at that label. And again, please feel free to add any questions or even comments, things that you've noticed or things that you're looking for on your nutrition labels. If you've run to the kitchen to grab some of your nutrition labels to read them over, let us know, because it's very interesting once you really know how to look for them and what to look for. It's shocking sometimes what our favorite foods might have in them. So let's look at how we can really increase our nutrition in our daily lives and using that nutrition facts label to help us with that process. So healthy cooking or healthy eating starts at home. So the eating at home, cooking at home is the best way to really know, not just to eat healthier, but also to really know what kind of nutrients we're putting in our body. When we're buying our own ingredients, we know exactly what we're putting into our food, which then we know exactly what we're putting into our bodies at that point. So how have your food shopping choices influenced your eating? So are you a planner where you have a month of meals planned out, you know exactly what you're going to eat every day, and you shop based on what that meal plan is? Are you someone who is an impulse shopper that you just go into the grocery store and meander around and buy whatever looks good? Or are you someone who might make a list, might stick to it some of the times, but also can be influenced by some of those good deals or just whatever sounds good when you're shopping? A big hint is not to go shopping when you're hungry. I've been guilty of that sometimes, and I do tend to buy more when I'm hungry when I'm shopping. Or are you someone who maybe shops the ads? And so maybe you make your meal plan based on your ads. And all of those are correct, based on what you need, based on what your interests are, based on how much time and how much money you have to spend on groceries. I have a lesson that I did on food budgeting and meal planning. So you can check that out on our Purdue Extension Vanderbilt County Facebook page if you want a little bit more information about good food shopping. So feel free to share with us about what your food shopping style is. So when you're shopping, how often are you checking that nutrition label while you're shopping? Make sure, again, to eat before you shop. Don't shop hungry. I can provide you, if you're interested, we have a quick tips for reading your nutrition facts label little card that I can send to you or share with you that you can take with you to the store that gives you all of those things to look for on your nutrition label as you're shopping. It's a nice little card that you can take with you. Use fresh vegetables and fruits when they're in season. When fruits and vegetables are not in season, they're going to be more expensive, and they may not be as high a quality as they would if they're fresh and in season. So if you shop at your farmers markets, that's a great way to get fresh local produce that's going to be really high in nutrients. But even using frozen and canned versions of those fruits and vegetables will still give you a lot of the same nutritional value and might cost a little bit less as well, and maybe a little bit more shelf stable. So you might be able to buy in bulk to be able to have those for a little bit longer. When you're buying canned goods, and even when you're buying frozen, look for low sodium, no salt added on the label to make sure that you're not getting too much added sodium in those. When you're buying frozen fruits and vegetables, be sure that they are the whole fruits or vegetables and not added salts and sauces. Sometimes they can add some extra in there, but again, looking at the ingredients and looking at the nutrition label will give you a good idea of what is in those foods. So when we're comparing foods, it's important to know a few things. We want to be able to look at that label and be able to quickly glance and compare two foods. Like in the example in this picture, it has cheese crackers and whole wheat crackers. So look at those labels, and when you have that idea of what you're looking for, with especially those percent daily values, that can give you a good sense of, which food might be a better choice for my family. So we're wanting higher amounts of those good nutrients, lower amounts of those nutrients that we need to eat a little bit less of. And if you want to look at how many you might need, the FDA does have lots and lots of resources. The USDA and the FDA have great resources beyond today that will give you lots more information. And of course, email me to get more information if you're looking for something specific for you. So again, as a reminder, we want to get fewer amount and lower amounts of the saturated and trans fats, lower sodium, and lower added sugars. And it is an emphasis on those added sugars in there because lots of foods have carbohydrates, but they might be good for our bodies. So we need to look at just the added sugars when we're really focusing on that piece. We want to get more of foods that have dietary fiber. Dietary fiber is very important for our body functioning. We want to get higher amounts of vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. So we want to look at those labels and look at those foods that have higher amounts of those vitamins in them. Bread products. So some of these are some general food shopping tips for you. This is a very general list. We have lots of other lessons and information on really important things to look for. The USDA choosemyplate.gov has really great resources on how to shop and foods to look for to really fill out your plate and have a good balanced diet. So we want to choose bread products that are higher in fiber. They're going to allow us to have be fuller longer and give us more nutrients in those breads versus just being a straight simple carbohydrate. We want to look at whole grains. They're going to have higher fiber and have, again, more nutrients in them. So in the dairy products, we want to look for fat-free or low-fat products when possible. When we're looking at our snacks, we want to choose snacks with low sodium and low added sugar. So we can look at more fruits and vegetables. Those will give us they might satiate our snack needs, but give us more nutrients in them. So they're much more nutrient dense than some of our packaged snacks. We also want to look for low sodium or unsweetened versions of our favorite canned or frozen products or even bottled products. And of course, water is the best choice and usually the cheapest when we can get it from our tap. But water versus any kinds of sugar sweetened beverages. When you are looking at what you're ingesting, make sure you are also looking at your beverages and check those labels of your beverages and see just how much of the added sugars and maybe how low in some of the other nutrients they are. So when we're looking at our ingredients, let's dig a little bit more in there. So when we're looking at this, the ingredient list is is very important as well. Our nutrition label is great to look at and it gives us a lot of great information, but we also want to look at that ingredient list as well. So again, the ingredient with the most contribution, the most amount of that ingredient is listed first, and then it is listed based on the amount listed after that. So when we're looking for it, we want to look at things like whole grains, whole wheat, whole grain, barley is a whole grain, quinoa is a whole grain. We want to see that whole when we're looking at our grains. We also want to know the kinds of sugars and see what kind of sugars, especially if there's multiple sugars listed in the ingredients, it's going to have to be most likely a higher added sugar amount in there. And look at where some of our added trans fats might be coming from. Look at those ingredients and really know what you're looking at. And there's more information out there on what kind of ingredients are good and what kind of ingredients we need to kind of shy away from. So based on what we talked about so far, I want you guys, if you can, in the comments to list 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 things that you can do to change your food shopping habits. And if you don't want to share with everyone, you can just make a list on your own. Think about what's something you can do right now. If you're going to the grocery store when you finish this, what are you going to do to change your shopping habits? What kinds of things are you going to look for? What are you going to start looking at the labels? Are you going to do more comparison? Anything like that. So feel free to share that in the comments or even just do that on your own. But write out your goals. When you write out your goals, you're much more likely to actually hold to them. So let's quickly look at some healthy choices at home. We're going to dive into the USDA MyPlate. It's very rare in a Healthy Kitchen series lesson that I don't discuss the MyPlate. So you guys might be tired of me talking about it, but there's a reason, right? It's a very important tool and it's a very important guideline for us to look at when we're looking at choosing healthy options. So when we're looking at our healthy food and beverage choices, we want to look at all 5 food groups. We want to have a nice balance. And when we get a nice balance of those food groups, we're getting a nice balance of the nutrients we get from those different foods. It would be great if we had a single food that gave us every single nutrient our body needed, but that's just not the case. So we have these different food groups and they give us the different nutrients that our bodies need to function really well. And based on your dietary needs, you might need more of one nutrient than another. And so make sure you work with your healthcare provider to look at any specific dietary needs that you might have so that you can follow those and get enough nutrients of what your body needs, or fewer nutrients if you need to eat less of a certain nutrient. So when we make half of our plate fruits and vegetables, we're going to get lots of nutrients and also really adding our fiber. The food we eat is not just important for that, but also in the amounts that we're eating as well. When we eat lots of fruits and vegetables, it doesn't give our stomachs a whole lot of space for a lot of other foods. And so when we're filling our bodies with the really good stuff, we may not need to eat as much of the other stuff that isn't quite as good for our bodies, right? And when we're choosing proteins, a lot of times we think of our meats, but there's lots of protein options, and we really want to focus on those lean meats to cut down on that saturated fat. And we can look at things like non-meat products, right? So fish and seafood are great sources of lean proteins, but even things like beans and eggs, soy products, and even things like nuts and seeds have good proteins in them as well. In our whole grains, we really want to look not just at bread. So we think of our grains as breads, but there's a lot of different kinds of grains. Oats, popcorn, brown rice are all sources of whole grains. So those can be great side dishes or even snacks. And even looking at other whole grains might be good in nutrients for zinc, magnesium, fiber. So check those ingredients and look at different kinds of whole grains in your diets and see how you can vary some of those grains. Things like quinoa and barley are really interesting in different ways to add different textures, different flavors, and even different kinds of nutrients in your foods. And again, we're looking at some of those low fat and fat-free options for our dairy products. So MyPlate, you can the choosemyplate.gov is a great resource for getting all kinds of recipes, getting great information. They even have meal planning tips. So they have grocery guides and meal planning guides for you. If you're new to the meal planning, it can be very overwhelming to do meal planning. So they give you a nice start to looking at that. So if you're interested in that, check out the video I created on it, but also get a friend involved. So have a friend or a family member help you with that meal planning process. It's easy to get overwhelmed, and it's easy to also kind of get into a rut with it and eat the same things over and over and again. So meal planning can be a fun way to get a variety of different foods, try new recipes out, get lots of different nutrients in your meals and even your snacks. So when we're cooking at home, it's great to prepare our ingredients ahead of time. It saves us time. It saves us some stress of trying to get everything done and ready, especially when we have families and have little ones or have really busy lives. It's great to be able to prepare that stuff ahead of time, makes that whole process faster, and it makes us more likely to actually cook at home when we have things that are easier to get ready. We can find easy ingredients. So cooking at home doesn't have to be a gourmet meal every time you cook. You can throw things together, especially if you use the MyPlate as a guideline. Find a protein, find a grain, find some fruit, find some vegetables, put it together, and you can make yourself an easy meal. MyPlate has great websites. Purdue Extension, the nutrition education program, has a really great website, Eat, Gather, Go, that has awesome recipes and awesome tools and ideas for eating on budget. So eating simply and eating healthy while also saving some money. And use those leftovers, right? When you're cooking, cook extra and save it as leftovers, or cook extra chicken or cook extra rice and then use those ingredients in other meals to make things faster and easier. So when we're eating out, that's a hard thing for us to really know what we're eating. A lot of menus might not include all the different ingredients, right? We don't have nutrition labels with the foods that we're eating when we're eating out all the time. So it can be a challenge for us to really know what kind of healthy choices to make. And especially when we're eating out, we're not necessarily eating the right portions. We're usually getting way more than what we need as far as portion sizes. So know what your personal daily needs are. Check out that resource from the FDA on kind of getting an idea of what your calorie amount should be every day. Many of the restaurants and especially fast food places and restaurants might have calorie amounts on food. Calories are not the entire picture, and we know that, but it does give us a sense of about how much we're going to put in our bodies. When we're ordering things that have simple ingredients or few ingredients, we know we can get an idea of what nutrients we're going to get from those foods. But having that calorie need and having that calorie amount really will help us when we're making decisions when we're ordering. And sometimes if they're not listed on the menu, you can ask. So some establishments will have those. You just have to ask for them. So again, ask for help, ask for it if you're really interested. Sometimes you can even go online and look for that information. It might be available online for you to check out. Okay, so when you're eating out, know your calorie needs. So know what your total calorie amount is. Look for any kind of nutrition information on the foods that you're choosing, and then make the choice that's best for your family and for you. So you can compare that information. You can look at how your side dishes are affecting your meal and how those might be affecting the amount of calories that you're putting in. So looking at maybe making substitutes for those different sides to increase, and think about it again when you're looking at making your MyPlate. Think about making sure you're getting a good balance of those different nutrients and the different food groups in the foods that you're ordering. And you can always ask for things on the side or ask for substitutions. Many restaurants and fast food restaurants will allow substitutions, some will not. But when you can, get those salads and sauces and things on the side. And that way you can choose how much you want to put on there, and you can lower the amount that you're going to add. And also looking for things like creamy, fried, battered, buttered are going to be much higher in calories than if we have things that are baked or roasted or grilled or broiled. Those are generally healthier versions. And also look at your beverages. Not only are the beverages going to add up to your final amount of your bill, but they're also going to add up on those calories. So drinking water is a free option in almost every restaurant. But even getting things like unsweetened tea, if you like tea, that can help you if you really need a beverage. But think about those beverages when you're ordering those as well. So again, think about what are some of the things that you're going to take away today from this. What are you going to take and make healthier choices when you're eating away from home? We might be eating more at home now, but we might be eating out more or even ordering takeout or delivery. So what can you do? What are 3 things that you can do? And you can share them in the comments or you can just write them down yourself. But what are you going to do to make healthier choices when eating away from home? So small changes add up. Every little bit counts. So every little thing you can do. And if you are looking to make changes, always start small because those small changes are going to add up to bigger changes and become a habit and be easier and easier as you go out. So looking at the MyPlate, thinking about your food groups, getting a nice balance of those different foods will help. Looking at those different nutrition information if you can. And then when you're eating at home, get creative with different spices and herbs versus adding salt to things. And even it adds a nice different flavor. So you can take your plain old chicken and really add lots of different flavor by adding different kinds of grains and vegetables and herbs and spices to it. So find different recipes, get creative, find fun new ways to cook. So with that, let me know of any final questions or comments that you might have. Please feel free to reach out to me if you want handouts specifically. When I'm in person, I have stacks of handouts for you guys. So I don't have that today, but I do have a list of resources and I can get handouts to you if you're interested. So please let me know either in the comments or let them know at the clubhouse that you're interested in a specific resource or look at the specific resources. Send me an email. Check out the FDA website, check out USDA website for great resources as well. So this is a whole big list of resources that you can check out. And again, there's lots and lots, but USDA MyPlate, the FDA has lots of resources for more nutrition information as well. And these are not exhaustive. There's lots of different resources and information out there, but these are 2 of the best federal kinds of guidelines and research-based information that we offer. So post your comments if you have them or any questions or anything that you have. So I hope today it was helpful. It was a very quick look at that nutrition label and really looking at the foods that we're eating. So thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoyed it. And I look forward to being able to see you all in the clubhouse in person, hopefully soon. But if not, then July's session will be virtual as well. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day, everyone.